Now, I couldn't tell you, after Whitesnake, so we did Whitesnake, the first thing that we learned. Do you remember what we learned next or what we did next? And what music was really capturing you guys at that time? So it's 88? Because I just did a podcast with Carlos Rivera. And one of the things that he brought up, and I had completely forgotten about, was he remembered some of the songs from the set list from the dance. Now, all I remembered was Just Like Paradise by David Lee Roth. Yeah. And the reason that was meaningful is that Van Halen was, for someone like me, no longer Van Halen, right? And I told him that it's taken me 30 plus years to accept Sammy Hagar as the lead singer of Van Halen. But we did Welcome to the Jungle, because that was like the thing. So what were you guys listening? Were you listening to that stuff, or was that just for the band and fun songs to play?
In the late 80s, there was a record executive named Mike Varney, and he started a label called Shrapnel Records, right? Mm-hmm. And that had all these guitar virtuosos on it: Paul Gilbert, Yngwie, Vinnie Moore, Richie Kotzen. And that just got me immersed in that kind of virtuoso guitar playing. And then came progressive bands like Dream Theater, Fates Warning, and from then on I kind of got into that stuff.
So the other stuff went by
and
the
I still
wayside.
am to this day.
You still are.
Yeah. But it's funny how the other styles they kind of take from the jazz and the fusion and blend it into their own styles, and I can just kind of really found that fascinating how each player had their own little unique voice and style, and even for back then it was kind of, and now those players are looked back, and there really hasn't been players since then who have matched their talent.
No, it's true.
So it's kind of cool that we all kind of grew up in that era where music was the thing. You were either into sports or music, and for us it was just
actually playing it.
For us, we just kind of.
I agree.
Yeah, but that progressive stuff, like and they were kind of around from this area. Like it was like we looked up to those guys, like the guys in Dream Theater, because they came from Berkeley, and it was like a dream for us to go to school for music.
Yeah,
like the guys from Dream Theater, or the guys from Fates Warning.
Absolutely,
they kind of like inspired us to try and make that our living as well.
And 10 years later, it's Herman Lee from Dragon Force.
Yeah, but And now we took it, and now we're teachers, and it's kind of cool that we can still do this.
Right.
But what that label, when you're talking about it, is that, so somebody like Richie Kotzen, very, very bluesy. Paul Gilbert has admittedly said that he's bluesier now. Back then, it was all about technique and very classically trained and all those kind of things. But all those guys were virtuosos, but coming from such different places.
Right.
And that's what made it very, very cool. Mm-hmm. And just to think that Richie Kotzen was also Poison until he banged Ricky Rocket's wife.
Sure.
And now he's in, all the different groups with Billy
that
Sheehan,
Winery Dogs?
Winery Dogs.
That's so freaking good.
Even Paul Gilbert, they're still relevant. Yngwie,
right?
But
Paul Gilbert has my favorite self-referential cover song. To Be With You?
Oh.
You've heard his version where it's the Van Halen mashup? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, I play that all the time. My kids are like, really? I'm like, you don't understand how good that is and what he's actually doing while he's singing. And it's just like it's nothing. It's like the easiest thing. But yeah, you were going to say something, Justin?
I forget what I was going to say.
I would say also the release of 5150. When those songs were just like, I remember getting the CD and bringing it to home and just... There's something about...
You were big into that. I remember when you got that.
I couldn't stop listening to 5150. Like, the songs on there were just... And the
when I think of you, I think of... In the beginning, it was the Randy Rhoads tribute. That record, that CD, or tape for us. It was that tape for you.
Yeah, we're out a couple of those tapes.
You that, and I remember you also had not Holy Diver.
Trilogy?
No, it was the other Dio one.
Last in Line.
Was it Sacred Heart? Oh, no, Last in Line. Yeah, that was the one. When I went to your house, it was either going to be that, it was going to be Ozzy Osbourne, Night Ranger. It was going to be, that's exactly it.
Oh, so you were super psyched that Vivian was in Whitesnake. You were like, that's my guy. Listen to Dio, and now he's here.
But they wrote good songs. Like, I'm a fan of really good songwriting, too.
Yeah.
That's why I think even back then, Night Ranger had great songs, but they also had the great playing and musicianship.
Yeah, Justin, you and I talked a little bit about that. So there's this book, and I recommend reading it. But it's called Nothing But a Good Time, and it's the story of the Sunset Strip and all those bands. But how the guys from Night Ranger, I think you said Rubicon before that,
Rubicon.
And it's like those guys as musicians, the other bands were going to see. It was like, no, these guys can play. You know what I mean? So whether it was I'm going to forget his last name, Jeff Watson, or Brad Gillis, like both of them could play.
Yeah.
And like the fact that Brad Gillis got that Ozzy gig at that point, you can't be a complete schlub to go ahead and be the guy to fill in on that band. But you're right, like they were considered musicians, but they had the songs, they had the look. I mean, they had all of it, the looks and the hook, and the fact that they get called a ballad band is just preposterous.
If I could just interject there, what you were just saying, and I think we talked about it in the other episode, coming from where Don and I were coming from, and you as well. We were at a certain spot, and of course, the next thing is you want to take the next logical jump, and I think that was the thing for Images and Words from Dream Theater. It wasn't out of our reach. I mean, we had already played Winger. We'd already played, not progressive by any means, but, a little complicated guitar part or a cool little drum fill. So Dream Theater Images Words, Pull Me Under was like the next logical step. Now, could we play Learning to Live? No. Could we play Metropolis? Definitely not. And to this day, I'm still scratching.
We got halfway through, though.
Well, we got halfway through. but the point is, it was
for 12-year-old. That wasn't bad.
Like Queensryche. I think that was Queensryche's thing, too, where, you could play 95% of the record, which was the next logical step. Yes, you couldn't hit those hit fills or that one rhythm or whatever.
Or those notes.
Right. But you see
Sing
what I'm
Jeff
saying?
Tate. Okay.
I saw them twice, too.
Yeah.
I saw with
Queensryche,
Suicidal
I love
Tendencies,
Queensryche.
which is the weirdest bill. Like, how did that tour? That was on the Empire tour, and it was like,
Who did you see them with?
Suicidal Tendencies.
Oh,
Wow.
Good shot.
Who did you see him with?
Once at the Boston Garden in New Haven. I forgot who. It might have been just them because it was when they did Operation Mindcrime.
Oh, you saw that?
I think.
Where was I?
I don't know. It was with Bob and Chris, the Maloney crew.
Oh, that was a
Oh,
little
no
older,
kidding.
okay. Wow.
Because they opened for Metallica with Crime.
I was also a big
right?
Rush junkie. I loved Rush.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like you juxtapose those bands. They're both progressive or complex or musicians, but they couldn't be further. So, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, I say people, like outsiders, non-musicians, whatever, like, oh, well, Dream Theater, well, that's like Queensryche, which is like, and then Rush is over here. They just have this bucket of progressive music. Right. I'm guilty of it too. Or something. I'm like, no, that band's kind of in that bucket. But those bands are very just even diverse from song to song.
Right.
And that's why it was always, I think, very attractive because you could push yourself a little bit.
And I think that was the big thing. That was the big allure for me with the Odd Times or definitely. I mean, I was growing up Hall & Oates and, stuff like that. I mean, it was never an Odd Time signature, but, again, when Pull Me Under came out, I mean, as both of you guys know, I head over heels for Dream Theater. I mean, to a point where, wow, let me cut 1/8 note off. Wow, 7/8. What an idea. Let's add another note. Wow.
So of those bands, Don, like which were the ones that really stood out for you as far as like, listening to what they were playing?
I would have to say Dream Theater too because we met them in person at the Sting.
Yeah.
And that
Great
I remember
club.
that. And we met them in person. Also meeting I saw Vinnie Moore Clinic
Nice.
on the Brooklyn Turnpike, and when I met him, that still kind of motivated me to start taking the guitar more seriously.
What a great record that is.
And the fact that the musicians I looked up to when I met them, they were good guys in person. So that kind of
Goes a long
had
way.
an impact too. That not all the musicians I looked up to had this ego or attitude that was prevalent on some in certain circumstances in music.
Because they all wanted to, you teach, right? They were willing and still are willing. They do the clinics, they do the meet and greets, and they're willing to talk shop with people because they know what inspired them and maybe they had a good interaction. You always remember the negative interactions, but like they seem all willing to share as much knowledge as they can. And that goes a long way, because whether it's you are, let's say you're not a musician, you're just sharing a CD that you heard. Like, oh, you really got to hear this band. It's the same thing. It's like you want to share something with people. And for those guys to want to say, oh, yeah, I can tell you how I played that. Or to be like, I have no idea how I played that, and I haven't played it like the record in, 10 years or whatever it is. But that's awesome that all those guys were cool and willing to go ahead and talk to kids.
I think that's what both of you guys just said. I think, like, for example, Tommy Aldrich at Whitesnake. Here we are, just looking at this guy, and we wanted to be Whitesnake, and here we are in 8th grade watching these guys. And then when we actually met him, he was just such a nice, down-to-earth guy. It just, again, you wanted to be that. I mean, you made it. I think he made it, just interesting. Here's a genuine guy. Here's a guy that would show me how to play over the mountain. Like, wow, what a great thing.
See, so how different my experience than both of you? Because I took some voice training, whatever. So I just had lead singer syndrome, which means that I was like a dick, and the people that I would be interested in meeting, they were also dicks. You know what I mean? Because it was like I've met a couple of guys, and I'm like, wow, you're an asshole, and it's like, well, that's because there's a certain element that goes with
being a frontman.
Yeah,
there
it's
is.
like ridiculous, and it's embarrassing in a lot of ways when I think back at it and go,
but good bands need that.
You got to have it. So that's what's so interesting when you talk about like Van Halen, because I had a conversation with someone recently about the Sammy and Dave. Now, Sammy is uniquely blessed with the ability to be both a really good singer and be a really great frontman, really good guitar player, and also be, for all accounts, a totally chill guy, right?
Yeah.
And then you juxtapose that with David Lee Roth, who is probably, maybe he's not the greatest frontman of all time, but top 5. He's got to be. And that was required. Like, it was necessary. But they're also, and this is what I guess it was a little bit in our time, because having long hair, whatever it is, you go back to the old Bob Seger song, is like, is that a woman or a man? Like, David Lee Roth had to get into fights, I think we didn't have to deal with that as much because the music was so popular, but I know I certainly went to places with long hair and people would be like, what the hell is that about? So there's that element too. So there's like a certain machismo that went along with it too, which is kind of ridiculous, but it was necessary for the time.
For back then, absolutely.
Yeah.
In a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to have to... you guys keep talking. I just have a lot more setting up.
And that whole Robert Plant, Steven Tyler, that whole school of frontman, I think came from that.
Oh, yeah.
You needed that. The visual, element to the stage show.
Absolutely.
You had Eddie Van Halen, the guitar player, virtuoso guitar player, already, like Randy, Eddie, Richie Blackmore, and then you had the frontman, and each member kind of had their role that they, kind of shined in, and I guess that's what made those great bands
historically,
great.
You can go back, you can forget about the guitar player, but just the whole idea of go back to some of the big bands where you got some of these bigger than life acts.
Personalities.
The personalities,
and talent too. It was like putting the right puzzle pieces together.
Well, so that's the whole thing. We'll use Van Halen again.
Kind of what it is, and it's just
Alex is a showman.
Chemistry, musicianship.
Yeah.
And
Michael Anthony's background vocals along with the bass, right? And then, so all of them, Alex doesn't do background vocals, but like all of them can sing, all of them can play, and all of them perform. Like,
well, remember, Alex started on piano and Eddie started on drums, I think, or one of them started on violin, piano. So they are well-rounded without question.
Yeah. So I didn't get to do as many of them, okay? So this is going to be like the really, really truncated, short version. So are you ready to play a game, Don?
Absolutely.
This is called Musical Highlander. There can be only one. So I'm going to give you 2 people, and you have to choose one of them that's definitive. One chops off the other guy's head and absorbs his power. So,
I like it.
Hey, that's the Highlander, man.
Let's do it.
Eric Clapton or Stevie Ray Vaughan?
I get to choose, or who